It happened. You made a mistake. You made a mistake in how you played. You made a mistake in the cards that you put down. You made a sequencing mistake. You made a mistake in judgment. But point is, you made a mistake. And now it feels like the world is going to end and you are just a failure. I think we know that's not the case. But welcome back, my friends, to Grief and Gathering, the podcast where we use our understanding of Magic the Gathering and all of its intricacies to break apart complex mental health topics like death, grief, sex, and other relevant difficulties. I'm your host, Lady Foxglove, and in this episode, we're diving into a topic that we all deal with, whether it's in the game or in life. Mistakes. How do we handle them when they happen at the table? And how do those mistakes shape the way we view ourselves and our mental health? Whether you're a seasoned Magic player or just someone who's curious about how these two worlds collide, I think this episode is for you. So feel free to shuffle up and listen along, and let's talk about mistakes, learning, and growing, both in Magic the Gathering and in this crazy plane that is our real world. So first off, let's talk about mistakes. In Magic the Gathering, mistakes are inevitable. Every single one of us has missed a trigger, or miscalculated a turn, played a card at the wrong time. Just a week or two ago, I was playing a game and I thought I had a card on the table that let me cast non-artifact spells as if they had, I think, was it Exalted, where I can tap artifacts to pay mana cost. And I played a board wipe, and the person shuffled their whole deck because of a card they had, and I realized the next turn that, oops, I didn't have that card on the field. It had been bounced to my hand. And so we threw off the entire game. And it feels bad. But you know what? That's okay. Because we know that the game is complex and we know that we can't be perfect all the time. But how do we deal with that? How do we deal with it when we get there and we realize, shoot, I've made a mistake? In the world of Magic, mistakes are often met with groans that, oh God, I can't believe I messed up, some embarrassment. But in terms of our mental health, what do those mistakes look like? Is it the same? Are we just as understanding with ourselves as we are with our opponents? Spoiler alert, no, we're not. We're a lot harder on ourselves. Or is there a deeper connection between our in-game mistakes and how we process errors in our lives? And I know this might sound a little silly, and it may, they may seem different because on the table, sure, a mistake can cost us the game, or it may, impact the fun that everyone's having. But obviously in life, mistakes can carry a much heavier consequence. And I acknowledge that that's where it gets tricky. A mistake in Magic can either be corrected by just continuing to play. But in life, that's not always the case, right? And the fallout from a mistake can linger longer. But why is that? Well, we're going to break it down. So, from a psychological perspective, we often carry this expectation that we have to get everything right, whether it's on the battlefield of magic or in life. We carry this unrealistic expectation that we must be perfect. And when we make a mistake, it triggers a kind of self judgment. It can often trigger these thoughts of, I'm not good enough, I'm a failure, and that can start to snowball. And a big reason behind these snowball effects is this concept of shame, because we feel ashamed for making a mistake. And so we don't want to confront it. We don't want to acknowledge it. We feel ashamed that it happened because we hold ourselves to this higher standard than we hold other people. And we do typically have a lot more grace for other people's mistakes than we have for our own. But what's interesting is when we're playing a game of magic, our mistakes are typically public. Everyone sees them. There's no hiding them. I mean, I guess you can hide, if no one else is caught on, but usually, especially like in a game of Commander or if you're playing in a tournament and there's judges and stuff around, someone's going to catch on that you made a mistake. And when that happens, that mistake is not only acknowledged, but it becomes a large part of the game's narrative. And so it forces us to acknowledge them head on. And that can be a really uncomfortable thing to have to experience, but it can also be a really powerful tool for growth. In life, the stakes can often be higher, and we start to question our abilities, our values, and like I said, it can trigger those feelings of shame or guilt. So, why is it that in magic, we're more able to acknowledge and maybe even forgive ourselves, but in real life, we're much harder on ourselves? Part of it is because it is drilled into us when you start to learn this game that this is a complicated game. And whenever I have never made a mistake and not had someone tell me, hey, it's okay, this game's hard, because it is. And we see our mistakes in Magic as part of the learning process. The more we play, the better we become, right? And that's exactly it. It's this concept of growth. It's not about avoiding mistakes. It's about how we learn and move forward with them. Because just like in Magic, where players become more strategic with experience, we become more resilient when we embrace our mistakes in real life. And that all sounds great. But it's not always easy to cope with the mistakes that we make. Now, you all are no strangers as people who play Magic the Gathering to those oops moments. And I know, at least for me, those moments are really frustrating. In that same game last week, I brought a new deck to the table. It was a Selvala. It was like a Selesnya Storm deck. And the folks I was playing with, I was used to them bringing pretty high-powered decks. And so I was like, oh, this will be a great table to test this out with. And I ended up, and I was forthcoming. I was like, yeah, this is a brand new deck. I've never played it. I think it goes off like turn 6-ish usually. And that wasn't the case. I think I could have won on turn 3. I ended up winning turn 4. And that felt bad. I mean, yay, it's a win. That's exciting. But it felt bad because there wasn't that community aspect, right? I play this game for mutual enjoyment of everyone. And so when I brought out a deck that was very clearly not at the same level of other people, it felt as though I made a mistake in a breaking of this social contract. And that was hard for me. And for the rest of the night, I was looking and I was micro-analyzing like I do. And, one of the players, they have a pretty stoic, kind of flat. They're stoic. Their neutral face is pretty stoic. And so I was convinced the whole time that they were like still angry at me. But here's where we can look at both magic and mental health. We can look at these together and we can look at mistakes and use them to form tools for self-compassion. The first step I like to chat with people about, and this comes from a very cognitive behavioral approach, is whether you're playing a game or just living your life, it's working on reframing how you view your mistake. In magic, we've already done that usually. We can look at mistakes as a part of the learning process. So what if we applied that same mindset to everything else? In educational psych, we call this a growth mindset. And it's, instead of saying, I messed up, I'm so stupid, I can't do this, it says, yeah, I made a mistake, but I'm going to keep trying. I made a mistake, but look at this opportunity for growth. Another piece that kind of falls into this is something I call the power of yet, where it's just taking those negative thoughts we tell ourselves when we make a mistake and adding the word yet to the end of it. I'm so stupid, I can't do this. Yet. I just don't understand what I'm doing. This makes no sense to me. Yet. And obviously that doesn't work with everything. I mean, you can't say, God, I'm a fucking idiot yet, but you all understand what I'm saying, I think. And that's that this reframing is a really crucial part of how we can change our relationships with mistakes. And it doesn't happen overnight, and I know that. It's one of those things where if we think of our brain like a muscle, it takes time to train it. It takes time to strengthen and get our brain to act in the way we want it to act. And so the first few times that you're doing this reframe and you're catching yourself in these negative thoughts of, oh, I made a mistake and I'm so stupid, and you catch it, you say, well, no, I'm not stupid, I'm learning. Your brain's going to say, no, bullshit, you're stupid. And you're going to have this weird internal argument with yourself. But eventually, the more and more you do this, you're conditioning your brain to respond in a certain way. And I think that that's something that really can resonate, and something that's, I think, an accessible first step to try and change your relationship with making mistakes. So, how do we create a healthy relationship with mistakes, both in magic and in life? First, and perhaps biggest piece, is this realization that our mistakes don't define us. We as individuals are so multifaceted. And when you make a mistake, you might feel like that is all there is to you. I remember the first time in college that I failed a class. It was, oh my gosh, I don't even remember what the class was called. The code was BMS 300. It was my first human physiology course that I took. So really looking at cell structures and voltage gated calcium channels, bullshit that I have never used once in my career, but was relevant-ish. First time I took that class, I failed, and I had never failed a class before in college. And so I was heartbroken. I mean, I went from a 3.8, 4.0 student in college to failing a class. That doesn't happen for me. And suddenly, it's like every accomplishment I made went out the window. It didn't matter that a year ago I was on the honor roll. It didn't matter that I was doing well in all my other classes. Nothing else mattered except this mistake. And now I look back and oh my God, I roll my eyes at myself because I think, how silly that was to be so worked up. And I'm not saying that I was wrong for feeling disappointed in myself. I'm not saying that it was wrong to feel sad that I failed. No one likes to fail. It doesn't feel good to fail. But when we make a mistake, it doesn't reflect our worth as individuals. A mistake is a moment in time, a singular moment in time where we did something wrong. And there's no mistake that you can't come back from. In magic, when you make a mistake, when I make a mistake, first I usually swear, I usually go, fuck, or shit. Usually shit. But then, you engage in some self-talk and that, all right, it's okay. Game isn't over. I can do this. Let's see what I can still do. And that's a really good skill for life as well. When we view our mistakes as our opportunities to improve, we give ourselves permission to fail without the fear of judgment. I want to say that again. If we view mistakes as opportunities to improve, we can give ourselves permission to fail without the fear of judgment. But of course, all of that is hard to do in a vacuum. And so lastly, it's essential to build a supportive community. In Magic the Gathering, that's your playgroup or your friends that you've met online, the people you play spell table with. In life, it might be the same group of people, but it's the people who can remind you that mistakes are part of the human experience. So whether you're talking about a misplay or a misstep in life, surrounding yourself with a community that encourages growth rather than perfection can make all the difference. Find the friends who will tell you when you fuck up and will support you through fixing it. Both of those pieces are important. Find a friend who will tell you and acknowledge with you when you've made a mistake and will be by your side while you make it right. And if you can find some of those people, your relationship with mistakes can change. If nothing else, they can be there to remind you that same grace that you give others when they make a mistake, you're entitled to that too. I know that's something I struggle with a lot, in my profession, in my social life, with my friends, with my family, with my partner. I have so much grace and empathy for everyone in my life except for me. And never, oh my God, ever would I talk to a friend or a loved one in the same way I talk to myself after I make a mistake. I would never, after my friend makes a misplay, say, oh my God, you're a fucking idiot. But it's still in my mind, that's the first thought that pops into my head. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier, where none of this is automatic. It takes work. And I feel like if you're sitting here listening to a Mental Health and Magic the Gathering podcast, you're not opposed to doing that work. So that's why I'm forthcoming. This isn't an instant transformative approach. If I had those abilities, I wouldn't be making Magic the Gathering podcasts, y'all. I'd be some fucking millionaire doing I don't know what if I just had discovered some magical key to instantly change your life. But I don't have that. And so instead, all we can do is sit here and talk and grow and grieve together. I recognize that there's no wet fart moment this episode, but that's because this whole episode is about mistakes. This whole episode is about wet farts. And so, yeah, I think it's fair that there isn't a specific one. I think I've shared like 4 in this whole thing today. But before we wrap up, I just want to leave you with this thought. Mistakes aren't the enemy. Mistakes are our teachers. And whether it's a missed opportunity in a game or a mistake in your life, remember that it's one step along your path to becoming a better player or a better person. Thank you so very much for joining me today. This has been the Grief and Gathering podcast. I hope that this episode gave you some ideas on how you can examine and maybe begin to shift your relationship with mistakes and make them into something you learn from and keep moving forward with. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you do all the things like, comment, subscribe, share it. And if you didn't like the episode, still share it and tell me about how awful it is, because even if you didn't like it, you sharing it really helps me out. So either way, give me that interaction. But until next time, may all of your hands be keepable, and may all of your mistakes be the lessons that help you grow. I'm Lady Foxglove, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.